Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, out on another walk. And this time I'm close to Amberley in West Sussex. I'm at North Stoke and I'm here by the delightful church St Mary's the Virgins. I want to investigate a little bit about it, and I'm very fortunate today because I'm accompanied by Dr Annabelle Hughes. Hello, Dr Annabelle Hughes. Can I call you Annabelle?
Do.
Fantastic. Yeah. Now, you're a historian based in Horsham. I've read one of your books, which is fantastic, about Horsham houses, which is superb. You love churches and you're also into timber-framed buildings. Yes. Just to give you a bit of an intro to my viewers. But we're going to have a look at this delightful church, which is under the auspices of the
Churches Conservation Trust.
That's it. Just wanted to make sure I got it in the right order. Churches Conservation Trust. And so it's a Saxon church initially, isn't it? Essentially, is that right?
Yes.
In its early origins.
Yes, it was certainly here by 1066.
Right. But of course, as all churches are, it's changed a little from its original.
It has rather, yeah.
Shall we take a little walk around the exterior? I'm going to come this side of you because I have my camera in my right hand, and just have a look at what we've got. So it's a very humble church.
Now it is quite small. It hasn't enlarged a huge amount because it was a small settlement, but it was important. It was on a sort of road line from Arundel to the north, and it's fairly near a river crossing, a ford
on the Arun, the River Arun.
So that was what made it important. The porch went on in the sort of 1500s.
So a later addition, with a later Horsham stone or slab.
Well, they were still using Horsham stone at that stage. Absolutely.
So it's essentially, now as you look at it, a mixture of flint and rubble.
Yes, with stone coins, yes.
Yes.
And buttressing, stone buttressing, because it didn't have that bell tower to begin with.
That's a later addition.
That's a later addition, and the transepts that project out each side, those are later additions, and the chancel at that end of the church, which we were standing by initially, that's a rebuild.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Oh,
this
right.
part here.
So, so of course, it's like any church you go into, all these different periods where change has gone, which of course makes them fascinating places to explore.
Yes.
Because every stage tells its own unique story. Now we're coming up to 3 graves, which when we first arrived you pointed out.
We're not sure that they're their graves, but they're certainly their tombstones.
Oh right, okay.
And these are the tombstones, almost certainly, of the 3 earliest clergy that we had names for, and they were in the 1100s.
They're now.
But these were at one time inside the church.
Oh, were they?
And they have been brought outside, and they do look a bit sad, don't they?
I was going to say they're covered in moss, and there's no description, there's no headstone or anything like that. So you found that out through records, presumably.
Yes, this is from record. And remember, the normal, everyday people, even when they were buried in the churchyards, did not have gravestones before the 1800s.
So
these would have to be rather more special, and that's why we're fairly sure that they're the priests who served here.
Is there a significance to being buried on the east end of the church?
Well, these weren't.
Oh no, they've just. That's right. You said they've just been positioned. So
we don't know where they were inside the church. This is of interest.
Oh yeah.
This is a blocked doorway. We know people tend to call it a priest's door, usually because it led to the vicarage. So we're fairly sure the vicarage was somewhere where there's a whole lot of outbuildings now.
Yes. So that's probably a timber-framed.
It would be a timber-frame building, yes.
As presumably, of course, all the buildings in the village would have been small timber-frame buildings.
They would have all been timber-frame, so that's where this church was remarkable, in that it was in stone and flint, solid, rather than timber frame, which everybody else was living in.
And the other interesting thing that you mentioned before, and people often forget, is that particularly in the early stages of the church, it was the village hall, it was the centre of the community.
It went on being the principal building where people could meet their friends, arrange things, buy and sell very often for somewhere like this.
Yes.
This was their social centre.
Let's go into their social centre and have a look on the inside, because it is quite magical when you get in. And again, like all churches, the history and the story of it is revealed in its own unique way. It's very spacious when you come in. It is very spacious, but also very plain in a way, as we see it now.
Yes, it wasn't quite as plain. When our early worshippers or villagers came here, the whole place was a riot of colour. All the walls, we've got bits of painting left, but we know that people painted the walls of their churches with pictures of saints, of heaven and hell, all sorts of things. And they would do it, they would repeat them, they would repaint them as they had the money to do it.
Hardham Church is a prime example of...
Yes, and West Chiltington is another one, which has sequences of painting and over-painting. And here we've got bits around the chancel, and we've got sort of remnants of paint work left.
And it's very hard. It's hard when you visit churches, if you don't really know too much about them, to sort of imagine them with that riot of colour.
It is very difficult, and we probably wouldn't like it now. We've got used to them being plain
and very reverend and very peaceful.
It was a riot of colour. Also, they would have had a screen across the archway there. That would have been screening the altar from the main body of the church.
Right.
So that again would cut down the space.
Yes.
And if you look for the original church, the windows high in the walls, it would have been a lot darker. Yes,
of course. We're blessed with the windows in the chancel and in the transepts there.
Yeah.
One of the curious things, or interesting things for me, is that we have access to the north door.
Yes, we have no west entrance here.
No.
So you have the opposing doors, which you have in a lot of churches, except very often the north door is blocked.
Yes.
Now, perhaps the interesting thing is the odd markings that you find around this door particularly, and on this side as well. They're probably what we tend to call magic marks. They're protecting this entrance from nasty things coming in.
Yes, people were very superstitious, of course, back then. I mean, people still are superstitious.
Still are, yes.
So we shouldn't knock it.
These perhaps mistakenly get called pilgrim marks, but almost certainly these are what we would call magic marks.
Yes. Yes, and they're very and it's amazing, you know,
and you'll find
they're still there.
Churches. Yes, you'll find a lot of this kind of graffiti in churches.
And that's the interesting thing, is when you visit a church, there's so many of these little details which then make the place completely unique and fascinating. And you've got a few more of these things to show me.
A number of these things, yes. We have what I tend to call a mason's joke.
A mason's joke?
Because here we have a hand holding up the corbel of the church.
Yes.
Which would of course been impossible.
Absolutely.
But
yes, because there's no, you know, even if you could, there's no power in a wrist.
No.
So it's holding in his hand with his wrist, basically.
But he's making his mark, isn't he?
Yes.
I have been here.
I have been here.
I am holding up the rest of the church.
Yes, no, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then there is a rather nice ram's head.
Oh, yes.
Over the other side. We're not quite sure why we've got this large alcove, whether there was something in it.
Some sort of display.
It was important. Yes, it was important that you had the ram's head. And this is actually a 17th century table.
Oh, is
of the
it?
Sort that would be used for an altar, yes.
Heavens.
After the Reformation. We have one or two what we call ledger stones, which mark where people were buried in church. And people were buried within the church. We know that although there are tiles there now,
yes, these are Victorian, are they?
Tell us that people are buried underneath.
Right.
And if you were really well off, not only were you buried in church, but you could afford a stone on top with an inscription.
Yes, that must have cost you a fair old
that
thing.
Cost a fair bit. So you know that the people who afforded that were the important people in the village at the time.
Yes, and wealthy.
Yes. We have, although this frontal is not medieval, it is something that we're very pleased to have. We're able to commission a local artist to produce this wonderful frontal, which has "My soul does magnify the Lord," because it is St. Mary as the Virgin, and that remembers the story in the Bible when she was told that she was going to produce a child.
And the colours of that
colours are wonderful,
are absolutely brilliant. The church itself is decommissioned, isn't it? But that's, which is why the trust has it now.
Yes, but we do have occasional services and events.
Right, yes. So it isn't just an idle church sitting there doing nothing, of course.
No, people meet here and enjoy concerts and talks.
Yes. And I think that's an important thing to stress, that it isn't just sitting in the countryside slowly falling to bits, even though, of course, the trust needs money to keep these things going, and importantly do, because it's so much our heritage and the history of who we are.
This is an unusual thing for a village church, having what we call the sedilia, the 3 seats.
The sedilia.
Sedilia.
Yes.
Seats at different intervals. And the top one would be for the priest who was taking the Mass, and then the deacon in the middle one would be assisting, and the subdeacon who was the lowest of the low, but still helping them at the Mass. Thank you so much, Dr Annabelle Hughes. And don't forget to check out the links, they'll be below, to the Conservation Trust for the churches. And join me again on another wander round when I go looking at some heritage, landscape and nature. But from me and from Annabelle, thanks for watching. Goodbye.